afternoon, or good evening. This is episode 3 of The Break. I'm Sam Maschi, the host, and today we're going to be discussing the usual stuff, some approval ratings, some poll numbers, as well as a couple New York Times/Siena polls about people rating the economy and Biden's approval within the Democratic Party. But first, let's start off with Joe Biden's approval rating. The approval rating itself is about where it was last week. However, the disapproval rating has dropped by about a point, which is kind of weird that the approval rating hasn't jumped a point if the disapproval dropped a point, but not too much there. Still a record low approval rating for Joe Biden at this point. Heading over to RCP for the direction of country average here, it's pretty much the same as last week. I mean, it's pretty hard to go between this much of a margin. 75.1% of Americans thinking we are on the wrong track, only 18% thinking we are on the right track. And you can see right here, it really has not been like this. This plus 57.1 for people thinking we're on the wrong track. And that's both Democrats and Republicans, both people who support Joe Biden and people who don't. There's other reasons beyond just gas prices or other issues with the economy. There's more to it. There's things like the Dobbs decision that's still impacting people thinking they're on the right or wrong track. Going back to 538 now for the generic ballot poll, it's pretty much the same as it was at last week. It's dropped to 0.1%, so essentially the same. It's just a couple new polls coming out with Democrats on top. Not by a lot, +1, +4, +3, +4, +5. Not by too much, and these are only B-rated pollsters. And then we have a Republican +8 here. And this is not a very credible pollster in general. They tend to skew very Republican. So the +8 is very unlikely to be the case in reality. But some of these smaller numbers like +2, and then you can see Siena College over here +1, Democrat +1. It's likely to be a closer race than this +8 would suggest. So this is probably pretty accurate right now, this polling average of +1.7 for Republicans on the generic ballot. Alright, heading over to the betting odds. Remember, this is not a percentage breakdown. This does not mean that Republicans have a 63% chance of winning the Senate, Democrats have a 39%. That is not the case. This is just what people are willing to bet. So the share, a Democratic share, believing that the Democrats will win control of the Senate is 39 cents right now. Republicans winning control of the Senate, that share is 63 cents right now. So not much change in the past week here. It's basically the same number. But again, in the past 90 days, really since the late June when this Dobbs decision came out, and that was the first episode of this show, and it's still, you can see the impact, because it has not, the gap has not widened, and it's been a while since then. It's the 17th now, so it's been two and a half really weeks since that decision came out, and we still have not seen any drastic change. Obviously, this change right here, most of this is with the Dobbs decision, and it's still impacting our polling numbers and our betting odds as of now. So that is the Senate. Heading over to the House, however, it's pretty much the same. Slightly better numbers for Republicans. I think this was at 15 last week. It was around there. It was at 87, and this was at 16, and maybe it was 15. I don't remember exactly, but very similar numbers still. And then this is not exactly the same trend. It maybe got a little bit closer here, but Republicans have been favored to win the House for a long time now. So this was not as big an impact with the Dobbs decision. Really no impact at all, actually. But again, that was episode 1, so not too recent. Alright, heading over now to 538 again, and looking at Pennsylvania Senate. It's pretty much the same as it's been for a while now. June 19th was the last new poll we got. So averaging these last 3 polls, I'm not using this poll right here from December 3rd through 5th, because it's pretty old, and it's also sponsored by John Fireman, so it's a partisan-sponsored poll. Just looking at these 3 polls right here, I averaged it out, and it's about a 6.3% lead for John Fetterman over Mehmet Oz. Still the same as it's been for the past however many weeks. It's been the same for all 3 episodes now. Heading over to Georgia now, it's a little bit larger of a lead now for Raphael Warnock. So it was a +1 lead last week. Now it's a +1.3% lead, so a little bit better for Raphael Warnock there. Still going to be a very close race. This is the reason that this poll went in favor, or went a little bit higher towards Raphael Warnock. Is this +3 poll, having him at 50 with Herschel Walker at 47. But this will be a very close race. But this is probably very likely to be the actual outcome. Something similar, something within the neighborhood of a +1.3 for Raphael Warnock. Going to Wisconsin now, they still have not had a primary. We haven't had any polls here at all recently anyway. June 20th was the last one, but it's still, again, no primary. So we're not looking specifically at any of the candidates right now. North Carolina, same as last week, no new polls. The last poll was on July 1st that came out, so nothing new. Still a +1.8% lead for Ted Budd, the Republican. Still a very close race though. Arizona still has not had a primary. Their primary is coming up. We're going to be doing election coverage on that soon in the coming weeks. I think about 2 weeks from now, actually. I won't be covering that. Case and Looters will be in for me then. But still tune in to watch that. There's a lot of elections that night. It's going to be very important, so I hope you guys come and watch that. We got big swing states like Arizona, Michigan. Some very important races we're going to be watching. But again, no primary yet, so we haven't really been looking too much at the polls. But it's still a pretty solid lead in all these polls for Mark Kelly. Literally all of them, and the lowest is +2, but they get up to +14. So Mark Kelly doing pretty well. Over in Nevada, not much of a change. Last week it was around 0.7 as of July 10th. I think we had numbers for July 9th at that point, so it was 0.9. But now it's down to 0.8 or up to 0.8, whatever way you're looking at it. Essentially the same numbers here, though. Still a very, very slim lead for the incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada Senate. It's just a toss-up at this point. This much of a lead doesn't mean too much. This could very well be the margin, but it also might be +2, +3, and it might be +2, +1, +2, +3 in favor of Adam Laxalt, the Republican, as well. This is just a toss-up. It's a very, very slim, like razor edge lead right now for Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada. New Hampshire has not had a primary yet, but no new polls from there anyway, so nothing to be looking at over here in New Hampshire. Again, no primary. We haven't been looking too close at any of these polls, but some of these polls are pretty close. Some of them have incumbent Maggie Hassan up a little bit more, but some of them are very close, so this primary is going to be one to watch, and it might be a close race in November. Over in Ohio, this is still an interesting race, because we've seen Tim Ryan lead for a while, back at the beginning of this race when it first started. And then for a little while we saw the Republican J.D. Vance winning in this race, leading in this race, not by too much, but by a significant amount, up to around 2.5, 3 points. But now we're seeing Tim Ryan up, so about 2 points last week. It's the same around now. Yes, we haven't had any new polls, so still Tim Ryan +2% in that state, and that's a state that Trump carried both years, both in 2016 and 2020 by a pretty significant margin. I don't remember. I think it's something like 118 years was the last time that a president won the presidential election without winning Ohio. So you can see that Ohio's pretty much always a swing state, but it went to Trump, even though Biden won the general election that year, and it's becoming a more and more conservative state. But Tim Ryan's still leading by 2 points here. Again, that's not a huge margin. That's just barely a tilt right now in favor of Tim Ryan, but it's still important for a state that Trump carried both times and by such a significant margin. So Tim Ryan up 2 points, same as last week, maybe slightly different numbers, but I'm pretty sure, yes, this is about the same, +2 for Tim Ryan in Ohio Senate. Going to Florida, again, nothing new in this state. Last time I averaged it for the past 3 weeks, it's been +6 for Marco Rubio. Pretty significant. I don't remember exactly which polls I used. I mean, we might have gotten these new ones here. I did not include these because they're from a C-rated pollster. I used these polls down here from A-, and then these ones which were more recent at the time. And I believe we might have talked briefly about these last week. They do show Marco Rubio up quite a bit, +8, +5, +10, which very well, it could be any of those numbers. I have it at +6 for Marco Rubio. Florida is going to be, it's similar to Ohio, like we just talked about. Went for Trump both times, even though Biden won the election. It's becoming a little more conservative than battleground like it's been in the past. It's definitely still winnable for Democrats though. So Marco Rubio +6 in that state. Heading now to the governor's races in Colorado, nothing new here. I still have +17.5% lead. This is not really going to be a close race, but I still have it on my board as being a race to watch. It might get closer, but right now, +17.5 for Democrat Jared Polis, the incumbent. Going briefly to Arizona, again, they have not had a primary, so we haven't been looking too closely, but Democrat Katie Hobbs up by, pretty much all these polls here, not by too much. The most is +9, I think, and most of these having are much lower, +1, 2, 5, not too much. Again, no primary there. We haven't been looking as closely at those numbers yet, since again there's no primary. Going now to Florida governor race, we don't have anything new here. It's been the same for all 3 weeks. I mean, the latest poll was June 4th, so most of this stuff not very current. And then I did an average. I didn't use these C/D rated pollsters that have Ron DeSantis up 24, 16, and 19 because they're not very well rated. And then 2 of them were not even the candidate who was actually going to be running. So in that race, we had a +0.5% lead for the Democrat there. But again, that's not really current. That's been like that for 3 weeks now. So we have not, we don't have any very current numbers, very accurate numbers at this point in this race. In Georgia, Brian Kemp actually has gained a little bit, about a half a percentage point over Stacey Abrams now. We see these polls come out. Really, this one is +7 for Brian Kemp right here. That's probably really the poll that shot him up the half a point that he went up. He was at about 5.9 as of last week, now up to 6.3% lead. I'm actually surprised at this, and I think I've talked about this every single episode, but I was very surprised that this race is not closer. In Georgia, the Senate race is very close. Again, though, Brian Kemp, he is the incumbent, and this is essentially the same race as 2018, the same 2 candidates, but Brian Kemp does have the advantage of being the incumbent, but this is a very big lead, and I don't think this will be the actual margin on election night. Kansas, nothing new, and again, this is something we talk about every week as well, how Kansas is probably going to be competitive, even though it's such a Republican state in general. They had a Democratic governor who's running for re-election, but nothing new here, so we don't really have anything much to talk about aside from the fact that Democratic governor in core Republican states more common than you might think. Same with Republicans in core Democrat states, like Maryland, with Larry Hogan, who is going to be replaced. He's term limited, so we're actually having election coverage this upcoming Tuesday on Maryland. We got some interesting Democrats running in that race, so that'll be interesting to watch. Hopefully you guys tune into that election stream. And it's just Maryland, so we'll probably have some other some color commentators to add some information about maybe some other topics and stuff. But again, hope you tune in. Back to Kansas though, nothing new here. Again, this is what it's been. The last poll was April 27th, so really no information from Kansas. Going over to Maine, again, not a race that should really be too competitive in November, but not a huge polling lead right now for the incumbent, the Democratic incumbent in this state. But again, these are all old polls. The most recent was from May 13th. There's nothing new here. But again, still a race we're following. Michigan, there has not been any new polls. We see all these polls with Gretchen Whitmer up. Again, I laughed at this the last time. It's just, some of these numbers are just absolutely crazy. And I know they're not. Like 39, +34, +37, +36, +34. Like, these are not accurate numbers. I'll tell you that right now. But maybe +8 or something like that is more realistic. That guy, I believe he was arrested. But regardless, Michigan has not had a primary yet. Again, I told you guys about that with Arizona and Michigan not having their primaries yet. They're going to be, I think, in 2 weeks, maybe it's 3 weeks. I'm not exactly sure. But we're going to be covering that. Again, I won't be on there. Kason's going to be on there. You guys should definitely tune in. Since he's from Michigan, he's going to have some other people from Michigan on. I don't know exactly who. I don't know if he's going to have any candidates on or what. But you guys should definitely tune into that, even though I'm not there. It's going to be very important races. But again, nothing new here. No primary in Michigan. In Minnesota, also no primary. However, these numbers are not as crazy in terms of leads. You know, they're more realistic. But again, there's nothing recent here. There's one poll from June 8th, but the rest of these are all from May 10th and older than that. But again, no primary. But once we get the primary results for this race, we're going to start following a little bit closer. The numbers are probably going to be more accurate, and we'll be following the right candidates. So that'll be good, and we'll actually have numbers to report to you. But again, nothing new, no primary in Minnesota. In Nevada, governor's race, about a week ago, was plus 1.6, maybe plus 2.1 if we use the July 9th numbers. So again, usually I record this on the Sunday, so we get the most accurate numbers for you, but sometimes they don't have those numbers, and so we'll have to use the numbers from Saturday. So Saturday was a plus 2.1 lead for Steve Sisolak, and then Sunday it drops to a 1.6, and that's about where it's at now. The most recent was July 14th. It's about a plus 1.2, so it's been declining fairly steadily for Steve Sisolak. His highest lead was probably around 2 points, around 3 points over here. But this was a race where he was losing at the beginning, back in March. He was down 3 points, which is kind of interesting. But the only new poll, I'm not sure, I imagine we didn't cover this in the last one. This is an A- poll for Emerson College, having Steve Sisolak up 3 points. I don't believe we covered that last week. So that's a very high rated pollster, having Steve Sisolak up by more than the average at this point, which is important. So that could show that this average is probably a little skewed towards the Republican in this race for one reason or another. But in reality, it's probably a little bit higher for Steve Sisolak than 1.3 points. Regardless, he is leading in this race by around a tilt margin at this point. Heading to New Mexico, not a race that's really close at all. It shouldn't be too close. But we are following it because some of these polling numbers are very close. Once we get closer to Election Day in November, these numbers will probably become more accurate to reality, and the margins will get bigger for the Democrats in this race, and really all these races in these states that right now they kind of look close, like Maine. But these will all probably get bigger. We'll probably drop these off of our watching board, the races that we're watching. And then we won't be covering them because it's going to be like a plus 15 margin for Democrats. But right now, it is close, so that's why we're watching, and that's why we're giving this information to you. But again, nothing new in these past 3 weeks. Ohio, nothing new. I don't believe Ohio has had their primary, actually, but nothing new there regardless. There's some polls, this one, Mike DeWine plus 16, plus 2. And then there's some polls that don't even have Mike DeWine, which is interesting. But those are from a little later, that's from around January. But again, this is similar to the Senate race. It's a state that Trump carried both years by a pretty significant margin. But they seem to be pretty close. And this race, not really a Democrat winning. This is the most recent poll from May 22nd, so really no information that we can get out of this because it's plus 16 from a D+ rated pollster from months ago. So really no information from Ohio in the governor's race right now. In Pennsylvania, same as it's been the whole time, all 3 weeks of this show. It's plus 3.4% for Josh Shapiro, just averaging these 3 polls here. The most recent poll was from the 17th through 19th, and the oldest polls from the 10th through 13th of June. But nothing too big here. There's nothing new in this race, and there's nothing new in this poll. But this is still a pretty small margin, plus 3.4%. This is like a tilt to a lean at this point for Democrats in this race, in the Pennsylvania governor's race. It's not as much as the margin in the Pennsylvania Senate race for Democrats with John Fetterman over Dr. Oz. But that's something that's fairly common. Dr. Oz is not a super strong candidate, and we talked about this last week. I imagine we probably talked about it the week before as well. But that's Pennsylvania, still nothing new there. Over in Texas, the Texas governor's race, I don't think there's anything new here. This is probably just about the same as it was. Yeah, it's just about the same as it was last week. So it's a plus 7.8. So it's a plus 7.8% lead for Greg Abbott over Beto O'Rourke. there's no big polls here. There is an A- from Quinnipiac University. It's from June 9th through 13th with Greg Abbott +5. And that is the smallest lead. There's some more recent polls, these B+ rated pollsters that have the same margin for Greg Abbott. But that's probably fairly accurate, maybe a little less than that, maybe +3 to 4. But a +5 lead for Greg Abbott makes sense in Texas at this point, with Democrats just not having a good midterm this year. And then Wisconsin, once again, no primary in Wisconsin. There's really no recent polling here. We have a couple numbers from June 14th through 20th. We have 4 polls here. Tony Evers leads in all of these polls, +4, +7, +8, +17. But again, no primary, so we're not watching any specific candidates too closely. But once we get the Wisconsin primary, which I think is actually pretty late, but I don't remember the exact week it was, but it is late. There are some primaries, like New Hampshire's very late. I think it's in like September. It's very, very late for primaries. But once we do get the information to see who the actual candidates will be, we can get more polling numbers. We'll have a better understanding of what the numbers mean, how strong the candidates are, and just in general, it'll be a lot more clear and concise. But that's Wisconsin. Still nothing new there, no primary yet. So just looking now at House polls. This one, July 7th through 10th, I guess we didn't have this one last week. It's A- Emerson College. These are all Emerson College polls, A- rated pollster. We're just going to be looking at a couple of these. This one, Nevada won. Dina Titus is the incumbent there. We had this as a toss-up race. There's a lot of races that we labeled toss-up, both Democrat and Republican incumbents. More Democrat incumbents than Republicans, though. This one was something that we rated toss-up, a +4% lead for Dina Titus in this race, according to this A- Emerson poll. Again, this is a House race. This is Nevada 1. We haven't covered too many House races yet, because we just don't get polling numbers for those until, a couple months, a couple weeks even before the election. Sometimes we don't even get polling numbers before the election in certain races. But this is likely to be a key race, so Democrats +4 in that race. Then going over to Nevada's 3rd congressional district, same state, A- Emerson College. Again, this is, again, another toss-up race. It's labeled as a toss-up, and it's a +2 lead right now for the Democrat there for lead. The incumbent, pretty similar story to Nevada's 1st congressional district in terms of the electoral rating of it. It's going to be important in determining control of the House. Should be a toss-up race, but a slight lead for Democrats in both of these races here. And then as well in Nevada's 4th congressional district, it's the same thing. Nevada, all these races are very similar. These House races in 1, 3, and 4, not so much in 2. You can see this is a +11 lead for Republicans. It's not going to be a very close race. +3 for Democrats. So it's a +2, a +4, and a +3. And these are all toss-up races that we're going to be watching pretty closely. But Democrats lead just slightly. And again, these are all Democratic incumbents. So if these weren't incumbents, maybe we'd see just a total 50-50 race. But just based on the fact that they're incumbents, this is probably what's putting them up +2, +3, +4. But these are likely to be pretty important races in determining House control. And we haven't covered too many House races. I don't think these polls were out last week. We were still using July 9th numbers. And since this goes through the 10th, there's no way that these were there last week. But it's going to be something that I'm trying to work more into the schedule as House races. But these House races, very important. Democrats leading just by a little tiny margin in all 3 of these. So I also want to talk about, there's this poll from New York Times / Siena College, and it covered a bunch of things, actually, but I want to focus on the poll about President Biden in 2024. And they don't have like a graphic like this, I don't believe, for the actual poll for who they would rather have, or, if they would want Joe Biden or not want Joe Biden in 2024, but you can, take a look at this, the reasons. So age and then job performance also up there. But age is the highest, and I don't know if job performance is usually lower or it's usually high. I don't know. This is not really something that has happened in modern history. With Donald Trump it happened, but Donald Trump was just never popular, really. He was not popular before he was elected, when he was elected, and even now he's not popular. But the other one I wanted to focus on was this, which was the economy. So you can see a huge number saying poor, 58% total saying poor, and then Democrats is much lower and Republicans much higher. But 58% saying that the economic conditions are poor. And then I'm putting only fair, good, and excellent. Nobody's saying excellence. It's really good and only fair into the okay, the acceptable column, and then 58% will be the not okay column. But heading over to their personal finances, though, a much lower percent of people are saying that they're doing poor. Only 17% say that their personal financial situation is in poor shape, which compared to 58% is very, very low. And again, 17% is still a significant number, but compared to 58% who said that the economy was doing poor, I don't know the exact wording of this question, the nation's economic conditions today, poor, but their personal financial situation, 35% saying good, another 8% saying excellent. I think only 1% said excellent on this other poll, and really, I don't think anybody's saying excellent. And then only fair, another 37%, but very, very low, 17%. That's very low in comparison to 58. I cannot stress that enough. So whether this is media, Democratic media, Republican media, center, whatever it is, if it's media or if it's just kind of what people are hearing, whether they're seeing gas prices, and gas prices have begun to go down. Again, we talked about lumber prices a little bit at the beginning of last week's video, but this is still having a lasting impact on voters, even though it's not affecting most people's personal financial conditions. And again, Republicans still leading in the generic ballot, still favored to win the House, and they are just barely favored to win the Senate. It's really a toss-up, but they do have like a 52% and Democrats with a 48%. So technically they are favored by a little bit to win the Senate as well. But you can see that for most people, it's not affecting their day-to-day life. It's not affecting their financial situation, because only 17% saying their financial situation is poor, compared to the 58% saying that the nation's economic conditions were poor. So that is important, that it's not affecting people on a day-to-day basis, or it's not affecting them too much personally, but they still care about it a lot, as we can see with Republicans leading. That is really why Republicans are leading in the generic ballot, is economic conditions. That's what pretty much every Republican is running on. That, or being endorsed by Trump is the other thing that many are running on, and that's not popular with the general population. Only popular with a very small amount of people, so it's mainly economic conditions that they want to switch. But I just cannot stress enough how much it's not affecting people, but they still find it very important, which is very interesting in statistics, to see 58% saying that the country is just doing poor in terms of economics, but only 17% saying that they are personally doing poor. So this is either media saying gas prices and saying lumber prices and saying this and that and inflation, or it's just people seeing other things. It's probably the media that's the more likely, but the other possibility is just people kind of seeing some gas prices go up and they're not very happy about it. No one likes that, right? But it's not affecting them too much. It's money that they would rather have in their pocket, but they don't. So for most people, the gas prices and stuff is not too important on a day-to-day basis. It's not stressing their bank account too much, but they're still very worried about the nation's economic conditions. Just a very interesting poll to see that big of a discrepancy between people whose personal financial situation is not doing well and people who believe that the country as a whole is not doing well in terms of economics. But just a very interesting poll. I thought I'd share it with you guys. That is going to do it for today, though. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Hope you tune in next week. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. But also make sure you watch the election coverage in Maryland next week. We're going to be live on my personal channel, the Sam Maschi for President. And then also coming up in a couple weeks with Kaysen, he's going to be doing a great live stream with it's Arizona, Michigan. I think there's a couple other important states there. But he's going to do a great job. I assure you guys, you should tune in. It's going to be very important races. And because those primaries are going to shape, the numbers we're seeing on this show and the elections. So, thank you guys for watching. See you later.